Hello and welcome to our broadcast of our ABA versus SWPBIS School-Wide Positive Behavior Intervention Supports debate. My name is Jennifer Howe and I'll serve as the introducer and the organizer for our debate today. I'd also like to introduce the other members of our group. We have Ashley Kaczorski, EJ Answeeney, Kelsey Baxter, Megan Pawson, and Zachary Caruso. Our discussion today will begin with Ashley as she discusses school-wide positive behavior intervention supports. Ashley?
School-wide positive behavior support is a broad-based preventative approach to supporting a student's behavior. SWPBIS takes elements from applied behavior analysis such as contextual validity, systems change, inclusive ethics, and stakeholder participation. It believes that all students need support, whether it's preventative or in the form of behavior management. The overall goal is to provide an environment where students can be included, learn to their best abilities, and learn pro-social behaviors before maladaptive behaviors develop. It not only guides students to make better choices, but also teaches them help-seeking behaviors for when they do need assistance. For example, if a student is having trouble attending at desk work, SWPBIS may reinforce positive behavior such as sitting quietly and working with verbal praise. Then it may reference to pro-social behavior such as, hey, if you need a break, you could just ask. For students who need more concrete assistance, a break card may be implemented or routine breaks every so often to prevent problem behaviors. Using this approach, the problem behavior pathway is avoided or in best cases, never formed. What are the different levels of SWPBIS? As previously mentioned, SWPBIS assumes that all students require classroom support. The way SWPBIS approaches this approaches helping all students is by using their three-tier model. In this model, the first tier is universal to all students, and that's how instruction is taught to everyone. The primary focus in this tier is proactive strategies such as copying good tickets and positive verbal praise from teachers. The second tier is focused on students who do not respond to tier 1. These students are placed in small groups, usually 3 or 4 students, and they're placed in these groups depending on what kind of behaviors they display. They receive instruction that is carried to helping with those behaviors. Lastly, Tier 3 provides more intensive approaches such as individualized one-on-one behavior therapy or instruction specific to that student. The 3 tiers are meant to be fluid, meaning a student can move between the tiers as often as needed, with the goal is to be included in Tier 1 as much as possible.
So as Ashley was talking about before, the school-wide positive behavior supports is divided up into 3 tiers. And on this chart here, we can see, we actually have a visual of the 3 different tiers broken down. The tier 1 is the primary interventions, which actually 80 to 90% of students fall into this first tier. Then the yellow is tier 2, and only 5 to 10% of the student body falls into that category. And then finally is the third tier, which has the smallest amount, with only 1 to 5% who have to go into that level.
What about students with severe disabilities? Students with severe disabilities and severe behavior problems can still benefit from SWPBIS. In fact, in 2004, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, recognized the success of SWPBIS and required it for all students requiring special education services. As mentioned before, the tiers are meant to be fluid, meaning a student is not limited to one tier and can freely move between the tiers as needed. This means if a student is having a really bad day, and he or she may be in tier 1 for the majority of that day. and the next day he or she could be moved up to tier 1 or tier 2. The same is with students with severe disabilities. Someone who requires a lot of individual attention or support may spend the majority of his or her time in tier 3 rather than tiers 1 and 2. Outcomes of SWPBIS. SWPBIS has the potential to have many positive outcomes for its students, stakeholders, and teachers. It has the potential to positively affect school reforms, making it more inclusive for students with disabilities. They do this by providing the framework that supports and maintains inclusive practices, creating a vision of inclusiveness and leadership among teachers and support personnel, and they invest in resources for students and teachers. They provide well-trained staff, and they create a system to help guide teams through problem solving based on evidence-based protocols. Lastly, it empowers teachers and fosters student success across all settings.
So now we're going to show a video demonstrating school-wide positive behavior supports, which is being implemented at a school in New Jersey.
Memorial Middle School, positive behavior support in schools. This is a school that has been recognized by the state of New Jersey for the program that they're doing as a model school for other schools to follow. Follow me, because I want to take you on a journey of what they're doing. This is our 5th year working with the PBSIS program, Positive Behavior Support for Schools, really transformed our building. It's a total behavior program. It's been a great program. We're very happy to continue this in our 5th year, and we're going to continue. It's 4 characteristic traits: respect, responsibility, kindness, and character. So some of them always want to go to the bathroom and they can have a disciplinary meeting, and the sign is up there how to effectively use the bathroom. Pretty awesome. These signs are all over the building, not just how to use the bathroom, but how we should arrive to school, how we are in the hallways, how we are in the classroom. A simple message that kids see these every single day and recognize positive behavior characteristics and traits. I'm excited that 6 years ago when they started this program, I was a part of it. Just a little part of it. 6 years later, I'm back again. It's all about positive behavior support in schools.
All right, Jennifer, that's good.
New Jersey has one.
Overall, SWPBIS is a component of ABA, making it loosely connected. SWPBIS is derived from ABA, similar to how pivotal response training is a technique derived from ABA. It focuses more on proactive interventions rather than management of problem behavior. The focus is placed on inclusion, especially in a school setting. SWPBIS and ABA have similar goals and values. They both have respect for the individual, meaningful outcomes, social validation, dignity, normalization, person-centered planning, self-determination, and stakeholder participation. SWPBIS and ABA use some of the same approaches and tools to solve problems. This includes lifestyle change, functional analysis, multi-component interventions, manipulation, antecedent strategies, teaching adaptive behavior, and building effective environments.
So ABA and PBIS are loosely connected. Todd Risley, a prominent co-founder of ABA, was also a prominent founder of PBS. His description of a lifestyle arrangements is one of the seminal articles of defining the essential elements of PBS. PBS is viewed as an opportunity to build upon the ABA tradition by incorporating concepts and strategies from a variety of sources to address issues and problems whose resolution would further enhance our pragmatic impact on society. As stated by Johnson, along with other authors, several leaders of PBS were trained in behavioral analysis, and its literature has notable similarities to the ABA literature. Also discussed by Dunlap, Carr, Horner, and Zarcone and Schwartz, that it is not surprising that a large portion of the principal contributors to PBS were trained as behavior analysis. Published research in and served on editorial boards of ABA journals in journals such as Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis and remain committed to and identified with ABA. Carr, along with other authors, in 2002 identified ABA as the essential foundation and source from which PBS practices have emerged and acknowledged, in particular, the apparent conceptual framework and the assessment and intervention technologies that stem from ABA as core components of PBS. Dunlap's article also stated that the conceptual foundation of ABA is Skinner's framework of instructional apparent learning. This framework also forms a significant part of the conceptual basis of PBS. Thus, principles of reinforcement, contingency management, stimulus control, shaping, baiting, prompting, functional equivalence, generalization, and maintenance are fundamental to PBS and ABA. Although, as well we discussed shortly, PBS is exploring additional concepts that may prove useful in improving community-based outcomes. Its conceptual core comes from same source of that of ABA. Similar to ABA, PBS is an empirical approach that relies on valid and reliable data to support its practices. Research and practices in both areas of routinely peer-reviewed and published in numerous highly regarded 686 behavior modification journals. Similarly, federal funding for research studies have been provided following peer review of grant proposals in both PBS and ABA-based research. Both fields are empirically derived practices to implement assessment and intervention strategies that are based on high-quality research. The technology of ABA involves reinforcement, contingency management, functional assessment, function analysis, shaping, fading, and manipulations of stimulus control, and establishing operations. For example, PBS is a big visual prompter by having signs and reminders all over the schools of what they should be doing and behaving. Being derived from ABA, these general procedural categories also serve as the foundation of PBS interventions. Given that these strategies come from the basic laws of behavioral science, this concordance is not at all surprising. Dunlap, PBS and ABA 687, as we have noted earlier, the basic technology of behavior change that has not been created from the emergence of PBS. And it's clear that PBS practice continues to defined to a great extent by procedures developed and validated in ABA. PBS and ABA shared a foundation, focus on positive reinforcement instead of punishment. Both collect data to ensure that what they are doing is effective, but most importantly, they both have the well-being of the individual in mind. Each may be implemented in their own way, but overall, ABA and PBIS are closely connected.
I'm going to discuss some of the key components of ABA practice. Several of these you will all be familiar with as they are listed in the Bear, Wolf, and Risley article in 1968. We're going to go through the 7 dimensions: applied, behavioral, analytic, technological, conceptual systems, effective, generality. We're also going to touch on evidence-based practices, the service providers, governing body, range of application, the multitude of teaching techniques, multiple skill areas, manipulation of environment, and the issue of reinforcement based. The 7 dimensions of ABA. Applied, which is in regards to the addressing of socially significant behaviors. Behaviors are not chosen out of convenience, but rather out of significance. The behavioral dimension focusing on observable and measurable behavior. We're also looking at not only changes in the client, but also changes in the provider, which would refer to the data collection criteria. Would that change for the provider based on the extended observation and service of the client? Analytic, which demonstrates control over the behavior. Demonstrating control over the behavior is crucial, which can be achieved by several strategies. Just a couple of these would be a reversal design or a multiple baseline. Technological, which are practices that are clearly stated through thoroughly explained and easily replicated. Sufficient description and explanation for replication is provided. Conceptual systems, referring to the basic concepts of ABA and can help the transitions from just a technological to a theory. In other words, this isn't just a bag of magic tricks that professionals use to potentially put out a behavioral fire, if you will. These are going to be founded on evidence and theories. Effective, the study has a large impact on the behavior to be considered of value. Just an example would be referring to a nonverbal client who would have the capacity to learn 10 signs for manding purposes, or they could in turn learn 50 manding prompts on a lamp device. So which would be more effective for that client? And then lastly, of the 7 dimensions would be generality, which would be to exhibit the desired behaviors in multiple scenarios. The ability for clients to generalize and exhibit behavior across environments, people, and circumstances is pivotal. Reinforcement and manipulation of environment. ABA implements reinforcement manipulations of stimuli, environment, and seeks control of contingencies. Principles of reinforcement have been very valuable in the success of ABA. The above strategies, along with conducting functional assessments and analysis, have expanded the field of ABA. Conducting the assessments and analysis will likely increase the ability in several scale areas and to assist in stimulus control. The efficacy, operant conditioning, and range of application. Due to the efficacy associated with ABA, the expansion from the laboratory setting has been largely successful. ABA has been found and built upon operant conditioning, which has also helped to drive its success. ABA has branched out to several environments beyond the laboratory, such as home, daycare, and community. Multiple teaching and skill areas. There are a vast number of teaching techniques which are used with ABA. There's DTT, NET, error correction, errorless learning, chaining, task analysis, fading, and shaping. Application of ABA can be beneficial in several skill areas as well. Skill acquisition, social, academic, daily living, independence, and even functional play. Service providers and the governing body. BCBAs are approved by the Behavior Analytics Certification Board and are required to implement and design plans, as well as conduct assessments and analysis, and also to train those individuals who would be implementing the procedures. BCBAs are responsible for those providing direct care. ABA techs and RBTs are responsible for implementing the treatment plan with high fidelity in cooperation with the BCBA. The Behavior Analytics Certification Board is the governing body of ABA, which provides guidelines for ethics, applications, service standards, and compliance. ABA and SWPBIS are not equal. ABA adheres to strict external and internal guidelines, protocols, standards, ethics, and training. These strict policies are not as evident in SWPBIS. SWPBIS has moved far away from the operant conditioning, which has driven and provided much success in the field of ABA. Consistency and fidelity in ABA are much higher than found in SWPBIS. ABA utilizes specifically trained staff and behavioral analyst, whereas SWPBIS uses several staff members who may not, or most likely are not trained in the specific field of behavior analytics. Evidence-based practices are a key factor in ABA, which is not always the case in school-wide positive behavior intervention supports. SWPBIS does not solely rely on the utilization of EBPs as ABA does. ABA is an individualized approach to behavior change, which includes one plan. As a result, is very direct and effective for the client. SWPBIS relies on various plans, multiple scenarios, and circumstances with which it is implemented, which decreases the fidelity. ABA is geared toward internal validity, whereas SWPBIS is based on ecological, social, and other external validities. Clark and Dunlap 2008 showed that from 1999 to 2005, 63 to 69% of the venues described in a positive support journal involved typical context of ABA, while 19 to 24% of the venues described in ABA followed that same pattern. So in other words, we see a vast decrease in fidelity between ABA and SWPBIS.
Differences between SWPBS and ABA. As a behavior analysis, we have ethical guidelines that we have to abide by and make sure that we are upholding to our highest standards. PBIS does not have any ethical codes that have to be followed. They do provide standards that they want people that are implementing PBIS to follow, but nothing is set in stone. In our case, as behavior analysis, if we are to break any of the guidelines, no matter what level we are, RBTs, BCA, BAs, whatever level, we will lose our license. So for example, code 1.04 integrity, we have to act with integrity or we will lose our license. But for someone that is implementing PBIS, they hope everyone hopes and they are supposed to be acting with integrity, but there is no punishment like losing your license if they are not upholding that code. Consistency is a key component of ABA in order for it to be effective. Whether it is being consistent with data collection or implementing a plan, we need to be consistent in order for the treatment to be effective. From personal experience within our group and reading journals about the negative aspects of PBIS, consistency is difficult for teachers and other staff members at the school to maintain because they have such a large ratio of teacher to student. This issue correlates with codes 2.10 documenting professional work, 2.11 records and data, 4.01 conceptual consistency and research, and 9.09 accuracy and use of data. ABA is an intervention that is able to say what they are evidence-based. There's a lot of articles discussing PBIS, however, there is not as much evidence behind the intervention as there is ABA. ABA follows their code 1.01 reliance on scientific knowledge with a very high standard, whereas PBIS does not. ABA also requires that anyone implementing this treatment, they need to be trained and follow the standards of ABA. In order to be board approved, we have to do many hours of hands-on training as well as lecture training, studying, and take a board exam. Before we are able to practice ABA, and anyone that teaches ABA to others for trainings or a supervisor, they can only teach within their competency, which follows code 1.02 boundaries of competence. Once we are board certified to implement ABA, we have to continue our education and stay current on research, assessments, interventions, and much more. And by doing so, we are upholding code 1.03, maintaining competence through professional development. PBIS does not have set trainings that people are implementing it to be able to implement that intervention. They encourage training, but there is no minimum of hours that you need to take before implementing their treatment. So, for example, brand new teachers could have to step in that role and do PBIS without ever knowing how to implement it. SWPBIS is a Tier 3 intervention plan. Their Tier 3 is where we find the individualized plans. As stated by Brown and Michaels in 2006, there is a risk that schools using SWPBS models will begin with universal approaches and never reach a stage in which all teachers are taught strategies for secondary and third level interventions, which means that no students will have an individualized plan. So what happens to the behavioral severe students that need that individualized plan? Ethical Codes 2.09, Treatment Intervention Efficiency, 4.03, Individualized Behavior Change Programs, and 4.09, Least Restrictive Procedures all ensure that our clients are receiving effective, tailor-made treatment plans and that they are receiving it in the least restrictive area for that person. PBIS can be very effective just like ABA, but overall, PBIS is different than ABA.
All right, so I'm going to do a quick recap of our facts. PBS, or Positive Behavior Support, is a framework for developing effective interventions and programs for individuals who exhibit challenging behaviors. It uses a wide variety of procedures drawn from applied behavior analysis. PBS also is known for having a framework for a set of values regarding one's quality of life and systematic procedures for problematic behavior. PBIS is Positive Behavior Interventions and Support and branches further off PBS. It is said to have one of the most effective frameworks for intervention. SWPBIS, or School-Wide Positive Behavior Support, is the systems-wide approach for building the social culture and behavioral supports needed for schools to be effective for all students. This then was built off of the three-tier system, the first tier being universal, the second tier being the targeted level, and the third tier being more intensive supports for students. Some common questions that people might have is, where did SWPBIS come from? It started from IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and it is based on the principles of applied behavior analysis and the values and prevention approach of positive behavior support. How is it designed to work? It is designed to help prevent chronic behavior problems, provide early intervention, provide proactive supports for children and youth at risk, and provide instruction, practice, and reinforcement for students in various school settings. How long does SWPBIS take to implement? Since it is not a program, the length of time varies between schools. Typically 3 months to a year to fully implement, but many schools have reported noticing an improvement right away. What should be done when a student's behavior is an immediate threat to themselves? When the episodes of behavior are severe, there should be a rapid response to the behavior, and crisis procedures and a plan should be in place in advance. When do families become involved in SWPBIS? Recently, family involvement has been in all aspects of the three-tier model and has been expanded. However, family involvement is a key factor starting in Tier 2, especially when developing individual behavior support plans. We have some incoming questions. The first question is, do ABA and SWPBIS conflict? Who would like to take that one?
ABA and SWPBIS, I do not think they conflict. I think they could work together in a classroom environment, and I think teachers and ABA professionals can all learn something from each other, and I think they can work together in the environment to help find the best solutions for each student.
All right, and our next question that came in is, can they benefit from each other? Who would like to answer that?
I also think they can benefit from one another. I think SWPBS has a really good framework, and I think with the more harder behaviors like injury, that's when the ABA professionals can be called in and be used as resources for teachers. For teachers who do not have a lot of training in ABA, I think it's really beneficial to have an ABA professional in the classroom so they could so they could relay information to and get advice as to what the next steps would be for an intervention.
Okay, I'd like to thank you so much for answering those questions for us. And just before we end today, I think one of the diagrams that I'd love to share with you that was created by our group member, Zachary, illustrates how PBIS and ABA definitely overlap and they are loosely connected. I would like to go ahead and share that with everyone at this time. And Zachary, if you'd like to just go ahead and share some of the information as to how those two overlap and how they are loosely connected, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So on the left there, we see characteristics of applied behavior analysis, such as it's an individualized approach to behavior change. It has internal validity. There's a high consistency to the application of ABA. It follows a strict set of guidelines in the way of training, protocols, and ethics, and it can be applied across multiple environments. In school-wide positive behavior supports, it's a more universal approach to behavior change. It follows a tier-based format. It has external validity. Staff aren't specifically trained in behavior analysis, and it has a lower consistency than ABA does. Some things that they have in common, though, are they both use reinforcement. They both use direct observation of behavior, and they both rely on data.
Okay. And as we're wrapping up today, I'd just like to summarize for our group that ABA and school-wide positive behavior supports are loosely connected. Again, ABA and PBS have a shared founder in Todd Risley. PBS Foundation has clearly emerged from the science of ABA and is extended into some broader interventions. The two are not in conflict, and in fact, they can be mutually beneficial. ABA has a long history of behavioral intervention of operationalized behaviors, and so I believe very much that the two are loosely connected and they can be mutually beneficial. The ethical code of ABA therapists could absolutely benefit if PBIS had something similar and the training modules were similar to those that are received by ABA therapists. The principles of reinforcement, shaping, promoting generalization, and maintenance to develop behaviors is essential in both PBIS and ABA. Therefore, we do believe they are loosely connected. This concludes our debate presentation, and we thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Jennifer Howe, and on behalf of Ashley Kachersky, EJ Sweeney, Kelsey Baxter, Megan Pawson, and Zachary Caruso, we thank you for your time.